First, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Claire Babineaux-Fontenot is the CEO of the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization and the largest U.S. charity, according to Forbes. Feeding America is a nationwide network of 200 food banks and 60,000 food pantries and meal programs. Together, the Feeding America network provides more than 5 billion meals annually to more than 40 million people across the United States. Prior to joining Feeding America, Claire spent 13 years as a part of Walmart's leadership team, with her most recent role being Executive Vice President and Global Treasurer. In that role, she led teams across 28 countries and over 1,000 associates worldwide. A native of Louisiana, Claire holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, a Juris Doctor from Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, and a Master of Laws in Taxation from Southern Methodist University School of Law in Dallas. And now, on to our speaker. Widely recognized for both his culinary and humanitarian work, Chef José Andrés and his army of volunteers have cooked millions of meals for people in need through World Central Kitchen. His teams have responded to some of the world's worst natural disasters and wars in recent memory. The 2010 Haiti earthquake, bomb blasts in Beirut, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, wildfires in Southern California, and most recently in Ukraine and Turkey. A Spanish-born and raised cook, he is often credited with bringing the small plates dining concept to America. The José Andrés Group owns 31 restaurants around the world, including those in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Miami Beach, Orlando, New York City, and Chicago. Our very own Bizarre Meats is in the Bank of America Tower. Plus, he has 2 Michelin stars for his avant-garde tasting counter minibar by José Andrés in Washington, D.C., as well as 4 Bib Gourmands. Some of you may have seen José and his daughters as they eat their way through Spain in their new Discovery Plus series, José Andrés and Family in Spain. Just a few of his many more honors. The James Beard Foundation named him a Best Chef and Humanitarian of the Year, and he has been on Time Magazine's list of 100 most influential people twice. President Obama awarded José the National Humanities Medal in 2015 for his work with World Central Kitchen. A teacher, author, and veteran of the Spanish military, he has received honorary doctorates from Georgetown University, George Washington University, Harvard University, and Tufts University. José feeds people at the best times of their lives in some of the finest restaurants and the worst times of their lives in ravaged disaster zones. Please welcome Chef José Andrés and Claire Babineaux-Fontenot.
I don't drink. I support local economies. This is for the record.
For the record. So I'm really thrilled, José, to have an opportunity to be in your company again in my favorite city in the whole wide world. I'm happy that you're back here. And, I was thinking about when I actually officially met you and whom it was that was interviewing both of us. And I thought maybe as a way of setting a tone for the fact that I will try to keep it real during our time together is to acknowledge that I am not Oprah. And I think they might know her pretty well here in Chicago. I am not Oprah, but you are the Chef José Andrés. Yes, you are. I will also acknowledge that if I have any shot at knowing what these cards say, I'm going to have to use these, so here we go. But I know where I want to start, actually. All of us heard, and so many of us knew you by reputation before this evening, even before that introduction. The introduction actually doesn't speak to everything that you've done and the impact that you've had around the world. But what I like to do is actually start earlier than that. So before all of the awards, before 30 years ago with $50 in your pocket, you came to America. Why don't you start with, how is it that you first started thinking about food? Where were your starts?
So, Claire, before I answer you, and remember, I've been 30 years in Washington, and maybe it's the politicians have this amazing influence on me. In Washington, when the politicians are asked a question, they never answer the question. So, Claire, forgive me. But what I want to do is, I feel a little bit guilty in a way because I came and yes, you gave us a clap, but if somebody, every day for the last many years, especially during the pandemic, if somebody in America took an amazing leadership role in making sure that those people without food on the table in their fridges were fed, this person, you have it right here, and this is Claire Babineaux. And so, I am a boy like all of you boys and girls. Obviously, I didn't want to come well dressed today because my good friend and partner from the Gibson's group, Stephen Lombardo, who we have the restaurant, told me, Jose, please don't overdo it. Let the Chicago boys look better than you, and that's why I brought down my dress code. I hope my wife doesn't see me in the photo next to some of you, or I'll be in trouble. But my life has been like that, right? I didn't have, and if we cannot tweet about it, because my relationship with my mom and my father was this relationship that maybe some of you maybe had, this amazing love, but sometimes this kind of family, I will not use the word hate, but you know, love and whatever. I am who I am thanks to them. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, all of us, we are who we are thanks to the people we have around us. Even right now in this table, that maybe you are next to people you are meeting for the first time tonight. But then go back to the beginning of your life. My mom was a great mom, a mother, a wife. My father was a nurse. My father worked in an American base in Northern Africa as a nurse. That was, in my life, kind of the early connections with America one way or another. One of my uncles was a doctor in a Ford cars plant in Spain. Another connection with me and America. But the connection I had with my mom and my dad, I will not lie to you, that connection happened in the kitchen. My father was the nurse, going to work every day. We were 4 brothers. When my mother got pregnant of the 4th brother, she began studying to be a nurse. And my mother was this woman that will never take a no as an answer. But my mother will be almost like a magician. At the end of the month, because in Spain you will get paid once a month, the fridge in my house will look like an empty Best Buy commercial. You know when the fridges, I don't understand why these companies that sell fridges, they don't sell them full of food. Because I think they will do a better job selling fridges. But my fridge looked very empty in my house. I remember that. If I had an iPhone, I would have plenty of photos saying, look at my mom is a magician. Empty fridge, but she's cooking something. The last piece of ham, dry. The last half piece of egg with green things growing above. My mom will always say, lo que no mata, cura. What it doesn't kill you, cures you. My mom will use that often. And we never had an issue. She will make with that bechamel, which is this amazing milk with flour. We'll add whatever leftovers, and then she will make croquetas. Croquetas that she will roll in these breadcrumbs, and croquetas, those amazing fritters that my brothers and I, we will fight for them every single day we had them on the menu. My father, on the other hand, was the guy that will cook Saturdays and Sundays. for whom? For the entire hospital, if he could. My mom will always get very upset because we'll be like, how many people did you invite? And my father said, I don't know, everybody, but who's coming? I don't know who's coming. And my mom will be like, really? My father was this guy that always said, big problems have very simple solutions. If more people come, we add more rice to the pan. So I think with this, I'm trying to tell you that between my mom using the last piece of food was in the fridge, working class family, but they're still using the last piece of food, the last piece of breadcrumbs. My father, this kind of generosity of everybody's welcome to the table. I think those two moments in my life, early on, is obviously what planted the seed in me of saying, I want to be in the business of feeding people because I see the love that my mom and my dad put into feeding my brothers and I and their friends. This has to be good business. That's why I think the love of food began building within me.
Wow. And it feels as if it makes other things make sense. I like to start at the beginning, and I think that was the right place to start, because another thing I know I'm not the only one who's curious about, you've actually been so innovative, so creative in the kitchen. You take these traditional dishes, often Spanish dishes, and you take them to a whole nother level. I've had paella, and then I've had your paella, right? And those are not exactly the same thing. In fact, I've had paella in Barcelona, and it was not your paella. So how does that work?
Where have you been all my life? I mean, I love this woman, and we've been spending good quality time on Zoom or in person and here and there. But yeah, I need more of you in my life, okay? Is that clear, Claire?
It is clear, and we have witnesses to it. But we already do wonderful things together, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about how our work, our passions, in fact, intersect. But I'd love to get a sense of, so how does that work? So how does it go from concept to something that I'm eating in one of your wonderful restaurants?
So I have to go back, obviously, my mom, my dad, very influential in me, obviously, like we all have those people, right? And sometimes we forget about them. People that touch our lives in meaningful ways, but because life is complex, sometimes, oh my God, that teacher. Oh my God, that coach. And that's okay. Sometimes we forget. But in my life, I try not to forget because I'm trying to understand who I am. And all those people made me who I am. But the iconic moment in my life, probably, as many cooks and chefs made me in my early days after I went to cooking school when I was 15, because I was not very good a student in the traditional way. And I will always get in trouble. Even I learned how to program BASIC, and actually I was a very good programmer. I loved to program. My Commodore and Amstrad. And you remember those things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You look young, but not so young. But my father saw very clearly that passion of cooking for me was the way to go. And he was able to get me in. Actually, it was my mom that went to the director of the school, private school, first year. They didn't even have a kitchen. But they took me in, even if I was too young to join. I didn't graduate. I actually failed English. Yeah. Thank you. English, accounting, which I survived the pandemic, so I think I did okay.
You did all right. You did all right.
Still, but and I didn't pass cooking either. I didn't, because I spent my time in restaurants because I was learning in real time. But the moment that it changed my life is when I go to this place called El Bulli. El Bulli of Ferran Adrià. Yeah, you can clap. And even if you don't know what you are clapping for, don't worry, you clap for the right thing. Believe in me. This was a man called Ferran Adrià. I get chills when I invite him for first time 20 years ago to Chicago to cook with Charlie Trotter, but that's a conversation maybe later or another day. But Ferran Adrià was this amazing guy that has revolutionized cooking as we know it. If I go forward many years, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was next to him. We created a class at Harvard, at the School of Physics. Two cooks that we didn't even graduate. We created a class at the School of Physics with 2 professors. And the class will be 500 people coming every week. And what we did was, we didn't go to teach. We really went to learn. But what we were doing is what he began back in the 80s, which was what we don't know, we must know. And the things we know, we need to make sure that they are checking the whys. Traditional cooking, we are doing traditional cooking. Why? Because somebody in the 17th century from a country called France, is this country north of Spain? That's why they have such a good cooking. And Italy is to the right, Yeah, I'm very chauvinistic on that. And he's the guy that began just challenging the very basics of cooking. Why are we doing what we're doing? And in the process, finding answers. Ferran Adrià single-handed has done hundreds of new techniques, like espherification. One thing is like you ate a good espherification or a bad espherification. Because we call these fusion cooking or molecular cooking. But that's a terrible name. In your salad, you had cheese today, right? But that's molecular. You had a glass of wine, right? Well, that's molecular. You had bread, right? Well, that's molecular. Why? Because fermentations and things have to happen for those dishes to actually be ready for you to eat. So everything is molecular because we are a molecule ourselves. So Ferran Adrià was very influential on me because was the guy that said, we need to respect tradition, but we need to look forward. And happens, I was right there. Like if you were a physicist and you met Einstein. As a cook, I was a cook, and I was next to one guy that was in the beginning of changing the way we thought about food. Was a Frenchman, Brillat-Savarin, that said in 1826, and I don't quote French people in public often. So I hope this doesn't go on my record. But I like French people, don't misunderstand me, but I'm a cook, okay? And we have a lot of competition. Brillat-Savarin said in 1826, a guy that on the first edition of his book, his name was not on the cover because he was worried of what his friends in Paris will think about him. So he didn't put his name on the book. Brillat-Savarin said, tell me what you eat, and I will tell you who you are. In a way, moving forward over a century later, almost 2, Ferran, what he did was, tell me how we cook, and I will tell you who we are. That's the moment that, as a cook, as a young cook, the understanding that food, we had to understand what was behind everything, to understand why wine was happening or what mayonnaise would happen. That knowledge gave us, not only me, but the entire restaurant food community in the world, a knowledge we didn't have before. Ferran Adrià helped us all to be more aware of why we do what we do. And the world now is a better place because of that moment.
Wow, that's powerful. You know, one of the things that I was fascinated by was the fact that in the middle of the pandemic, you opened a restaurant in this city that I mentioned earlier. It's my favorite city in the world. I'm curious and would love for you to talk, if you choose to, about that. But I also want to ask you something else, though. When you went into Philadelphia, you actually took on the Philly cheesesteak. And I don't know if you've been here often enough to understand but there are a lot of rules around the Chicago hot dog,
Yeah, I know.
including apparently no ketchup. So do you have any thoughts about what are you trying to do here in Chicago? And do you have plans on taking on something traditional and mixing it up? Or talk to me about what your hopes and your plans are for Chicago.
We are in very political hot times. And I decided that it's not the right moment to tackle hot dog.
I agree. You know, I kind of agree.
When I handled the Philly cheesesteak, the political conversation was different. Still, I think, if I'm right, in the Philadelphia Inquirer was an editorial talking about immigration and who we let into the country. And this is true.
No, this
Based
is a real story.
on this Spanish chef that in Washington, D.C., deconstructed the Philly cheesesteak. And was hard to swallow. I was thinking about retiring, but I persevered. Why? Because the Philly cheesesteak, I was only trying to bring America together, not break America apart. And to this day, and hundreds of thousands of Philly cheesesteak later, people of Philadelphia come to D.C. to enjoy that creation. Therefore, if you do things with respect, even if you're trying to upside down the system, if you do it respectfully, you will always build longer tables.
Yes. Absolutely agree. And there is no way to even question whether or not you're built tough and whether or not you persevere. I want to turn to a rather serious subject, which is the work that you do with World Central Kitchen. I'm so struck by every time I meet someone who I know is being touched by you, including me, including all of us. But as they were talking about the dais, they mentioned that we have a distinguished guest from Turkey. And in Turkey and Syria, since the earthquake, World Central Kitchen has provided 15 million meals, which wow. In Ukraine, 210 million meals so far. Wow. I was at an event not that long ago, and among the people on a panel was this young woman who is a part of the World Central Kitchen family. And it just made it all so much more real for me when we were in dialogue doing our little rehearsal, and they explained that the signal might go out because she has to hide. And they couldn't disclose exactly where she was. And I thought, oh my God, she's in the middle of a war. And in partnership with you and your extraordinary team, she's making sure that people get fed. And she talked about the method, and she said, no, Ukrainians are feeding Ukrainians in the middle of this war. I'd love for you to talk about the approach that you take. It's a unique approach. You talked about the organization I'm so privileged to serve in. We have an infrastructure, right? 200 member food banks, 65,000 agency partners. You don't start from that infrastructure. You go build something, you leverage something. Can you talk about how does that work?
So World Central Kitchen is built on this simple premise. When in a hurricane, in an emergency, when you have a fire, who do you send? Firefighters. When you have to do research, search and rescue, you send the SAR teams with dogs under the rubble of buildings after an earthquake. When you need to take care of the health of people after the emergency, who do you send? Nurses and doctors? Okay. I'm going to ask you a very complicated question. who do you think we should send after an emergency to feed people?
I'd say a chef.
So I always say that cooks like me, we feed the few. But that we have the talent also to feed the many. In this room is going to be probably hundreds of professions. Probably we have no bankers here because they are taking care of everything that's going on. We love you, bankers. We know you're going through a hard time. And you are looking after our money, and we love you for it. I mean, that will be banking first responders. That's the people you send. You're not going to send a cook that failed financials in cooking school, right? That will be a disaster. So I always say, and forgive me for saying that, because that World Central Kitchen is bigger than Feeding America, as big you are. I'm going to say that World Central Kitchen is bigger than Red Cross, as big Red Cross is worldwide. I will say that World Central Kitchen is bigger than the American government. Actually, I'm going to go deeper. World Central Kitchen is bigger than every single government in the world. Obviously, UN is super small compared to us. Why I say that? Because in the way I think, in an emergency, we're not talking fighting hunger long term. We're talking emergency. We need to understand also the specialization. In an emergency, every restaurant, anywhere we go, is part of World Central Kitchen. Every kitchen, every food truck is part of World Central Kitchen. Every market and supermarket and food warehouse is part of World Central Kitchen. Any car, taxi, or driver that does distribution is part of World Central Kitchen. What happens is that they don't know it yet. Long story short, one of the moments that I began building in me of why to create World Central Kitchen happened a long time ago. Across my restaurant in 1996, they discovered a red brick building that was there, but inside the building was what it seems an office and the living quarters of a person. That's the person that very much was very important during the American Civil War with the flying hospitals. A nurse that was taking care of the wounded behind the front lines. The person that created the Office of the Missing Soldiers Office, trying to bring closing to their families of what happened to their loved ones during the Civil War. More than 3,000 people were found by the efforts of this person and this organization. Was the person that created the American Red Cross. That was Mrs. Clara Barton, a nurse, a woman like my mom, but in a way so that the same nurse that could take care of the few, she could come up with a system of taking care of the many. So that moment was very important in me because I'm like, wow, look at that woman, man. What the heck? It's fascinating. This woman is amazing what she did. And then many other moments, but another moment. You remember Katrina?
Of course.
You remember the Superdome? Yeah. We left during days, men and women in the Superdome, many of them escaping the Low Nine, other parts around New Orleans, without food and water for a few days. That's a story. That's real. You know what the Superdome is, what an arena and a stadium is? If I ask you, and you don't think much about it, you will say it's the place to go to watch your favorite sports, NFL team, or your NBA team, or your favorite music group. But actually, that's wrong. If you really go to watch an NBA game, I will tell you that an arena, under my observation, is a gigantic restaurant that entertains with the sports. Everybody seems to is eating hot dogs. Everybody is in line waiting for their crab cakes. I don't see anybody almost watching the game. So if it's a young guy in the restaurant, because it has food outlets, why we don't put them at the service of the people in an emergency? That's why World Central Kitchen very often, we activate big spaces. Not all the time, but very often. The long story short is that when we were in the last hurricane in New Orleans, and we opened a kitchen next to the Superdome, and very quickly on the first day, I was able, with the teams, go to Houma, and Little Caillou, and Low Nine, and going to every community on the first day. That morning, some of the food we were supposed to be getting didn't come 2 days before, and then the hurricane made it very difficult for those food companies to bring it. So we were a little bit short on food, even we had enough for a few days. But I want to go ahead. You know how far away is the food warehouses of New Orleans from the Superdome? 0.7 miles. The only thing we had to do, few of us, walking even with water here, go to the warehouse, knock on the door. You know who is inside the warehouse? The owner of the warehouse. Why? Because he cares about his staff. Very often in emergencies and in these gatherings, for you it's easy because you do food and you are surrounded food. But very often I'm always asked in these moments, Claire, Jose, where do you get the food? And I always answer the same question. In the supermarkets and in the food warehouses, people. Brilliant, they tell me. And I look at me at the mirror and say, really? That's the long story of. So World Central Kitchen, with this idea, we never respond once, twice to the same event. Turkey is different than we did in Syria. Ukraine is different than what we did in Bahamas. Guatemala volcano was different than the Hawaiian volcano. The fires in Chile were different than the fires in California or Australia. We don't plan. We adapt. What did we learn in this pandemic? That we overplan. What happens when in our lives, in our companies, with our group of friends or our golf buddies, what happens when we plan? We have all the plans of the world, in our business. One plan for every moment. That the things, when they don't go as you plan, because we have the mentality of following the plan when something happens, the day we don't have a plan for that thing that happened that day, everybody freezes. What we need to start doing more, people? Adaptation. Embracing complexity, where when something happens, it's not something like should be bringing you down, but something like should be lifting you up. You have a genuine opportunity to serve, to put your expertise and your brain and your passion at the service of the people, your family, your company, your friends, your community. We need to put plans aside, start embracing complexity, and start enjoying adaptation as the best way for us to serve our communities, our city, our country.
Great. You know, there are so many applications. You know, we talk about World Central Kitchen. It's viewed as it is a nonprofit. And I just learned, apparently, the largest in the world. There are so many lessons that cut across all kinds of divides in the way that you approach the work. And I want to get to that in just a moment. I think important, powerful lessons for profit and nonprofit and government from the work that you've done. But there's something I want to go back and underscore. I mentioned with that extraordinary woman that I met that she said that it's Ukrainians feeding Ukrainians. And there's a space that we've been navigating in the work that I'm privileged to do as well, where we're talking about how important it is for people to have food that's familiar to them. I remember going out after a Hurricane Laura, not that long ago, and going out to Homa. So we've been to so many of the same places. And we brought crawfish etouffee, and we brought jambalaya. And the team there understood what you know, which is we weren't just bringing food. There was a piece of humanity that was being delivered there too. How important do you think it is to provide familiar foods, culturally relevant foods, as a part of the work that you do? It feels like it's the way you do it everywhere that you go. How do you look at that?
So when we serve foods that are local, quite frankly, not necessarily has anything to do with being culturally respectful. It's highly pragmatic. If you are in Pine Island, near Fort Myers, after the last hurricane, and we are serving avocados with every meal, we landed there within hours by helicopter. Why we landed by helicopter? Shit, because the bridge was broke. We had the helicopter prepared before? Yeah, why? Because when bridges break, the best way is or you go by boat or you go by helicopter. Boat sometimes in the early days of a hurricane is very dangerous because the waters, the seaports are destroyed. You don't have easy access to land, and may take some time until things go back. That's why in Bahamas we had 6 helicopters, 2 seaplanes, and 1 boat with 2 helipads. We didn't do it to be showy. We did it because the only way to feed 80,000 Bahamians north of Nassau was through helicopter, or they will go hungry. And during days, we were mainly the only organization there, if no longer. But talking about the food, and talking to Pine Island, why did we serve avocados? Because it's a lot of avocados trees, because it's a lot of farmers on that island.
Yes.
And actually, we were trying to buy them from them, and they will not. They will give them to us. That means that the first day I came with a helicopter, and we had, I think, close to 1,000 meals on the first flight. So we'll need 2 more, 3 more. The first one we came with fruit, with fruit, with an orange, with apples. To us, that fresh avocado was covering the need of the fruit we bring. So on the next one, we didn't bring more. What happens that because we show up every day, we are able to adapt to the necessities of the people and the circumstances by the day, not by the month, by the day. Because we listen to the locals, we hear to the locals. I don't come with what this white boy thinks they need. I come with the ears of what the community are telling me they want. Mm-hmm. I was in Haiti in 2010. I was very proud of the response that America did as a country, Europe, France, in Haiti in the early days. And this was the beginning of World Central Kitchen. For me, it was a very big learning experience. I didn't go there to feed people. I went there to learn. At the time was a bean called pois Congo, and was in season. And was pois Congo everywhere. And I'm like, holy cow, I'm gonna buy pois Congo, I'm gonna start making a stew of pois Congo, and these people love pois Congo. And I was cooking with the help of this woman. I was cooking for 3 camps, around 3,500 people total. Everybody was helping me. It's the moment to serve. And this woman came to me with a translator because they speak Creole. The poorer people in Haiti don't speak French. They speak Creole. I don't speak Creole. My fault. And they came and they say, can you tell Chef that we thank him for being here helping us? But can you tell Chef that the way he's preparing the pois Congo is too fancy and it's not the way we like it? Imagine that moment. Me, who was in the cover of I don't know what magazine and in the list and this emeritus thing, and I'm the best chef in the world, besides my daughters that they say half of the time this. And these women are telling me in the middle of an emergency. This was a huge learning moment because you listen about it. You listen that sometimes when we come to help others, we come with the idea of what we think others need from us. But we never come with a listening mode of what they do think they need themselves from us. Yeah. We never listen, we impose. And this was my theory happening in real life. In that moment, those women were trying to tell me, hey man, can you cook it our way, man, come on. So it's good to have an ego. But it's also good to understand that others do too. And ego is always seen as a negative thing, when I see it's a very positive thing when you do it respectfully. Those women were only trying to tell me, man, you're here helping us use. And you know what? Sure, let's do it. We had a blender, no problem. They found ways to smash the beans, to pass them through USAID, sacks. At the end, the way they eat it was not all these beans floating in the stock and fancy, but they loved to eat the beans like a puree that was shiny and velvety, and that was telling you almost like, hey, baby, here I am. And they didn't want the beans on top of the rice like I was serving. They wanted the rice on one side and the black bean, shiny, beautiful, silky sauce on the other. That's the way they want it. So you see, what we do, we don't do it because it's culturally the right way, but because it's the smartest way. Why? Because the ingredients you have always are what? The local ingredients. The people that you have helping you, what they do know? The local ingredients. At the end, what we do is very pragmatic. That then happens is the respectful cultural thing to do. But do I serve sometimes a burger from McDonald's on the first hours? I love a burger from McDonald's. What's wrong with that? It's helping me to respond to an emergency. I don't care about cultural rightness. I want to feed the people right now. What we are is pragmatic. In the long run, do we always do local? In Ukraine, we're doing borscht. In Bahamas, we did fire engine. In Haiti, we do griot. The answer is yes. Why? Because locals will make you more successful. Because the local ingredients will allow you to do the local dishes. At the end is not any different the way we should be running our cities, our state, our country, and if you allow me, the world. Let's do things in a pragmatic way because they make sense. Not finger pointing at each other of what you are doing or what you are not doing, but doing things because they make sense, they're pragmatic, and they are solving problems in real time. That's what we all need to drive for.
I feel I should speak for a while so that you can drink a little more of that wine.
I've been looking for a piece of paper for the last 10 hours, and I don't know what a piece of paper is.
Before. It's a
but
tiny
it's
piece of paper. I hope you find it.
No,
so what part of what I was going to ask, and I think you've already been doing it, Jose, is you've been weaving all of these kernels in, all of these things that apply across whatever it is that we think might divide us, but in a very specific way. So we've got a cross-section of people out there in the audience, as you said, at least 100 professions. What do you think we consistently get wrong? And then in business, in the nonprofit world, I mean, come on, we got a little time. I'm happy to hear you say.
You know I have 4 restaurants now in Chicago, right?
I do. And they will thrive as they should. I've eaten at all of them. They're excellent. Thank you very much. But what's your advice? Is there something that you think we're getting wrong, that you think we could fix? And then
Food-wise.
it could be food, it could be anything, but definitely
Yeah.
I'm interested in food.
Well, I'm very opinionated about everything, but
But maybe we narrow
Food.
it down to food. Let's think about the food system, what's working with it, what's not working with it. Is there something that you think is right there within our grasp? We have to have the will and the vision, and we could really have transformational change if we addressed. And what would that be?
well, one is what I described about World Central Kitchen, right? We're an organization that in the early days of Ukraine, 2 people went to Ukraine. We put a team of 6,000 people. That's how we were doing 1.5 million meals a day. With that, I'm telling you, letting people join you, letting locals join you. If we bring a government, let the locals join government. We have ways that sometimes happen, but we need to do more than that. Let me tell you ways that happen, that maybe we didn't realize the impact it had, but I can tell you had a huge impact. Even the people that made it happen are not even realizing, I think. It's what I call Trojan horses. Mrs. Valerie Jarrett is here during the Obama White House years. Mrs. Obama, the First Lady, did something like was super impactful many years in the horizon. 1,000 chefs were invited to the White House at the lawn with one very simple ask. Join us and be there in your communities to make sure that food stops being a problem, but food becomes a solution. Even if there was not 100 points of what to do, this was a call to action. So I believe in Trojan horses in more ways than one. In the same way I'm describing how World Central Kitchen, we are an organization that we allow others to bring us in. This is one of the things that I realize we are still falling short of its full potential. If I ask you right now to write in a piece of paper the 3 more important things that you believe can keep running America and the world better, I guarantee you that besides her and me, and the few people that has listened to my talk sometimes, none of you will put the word food on the 3 things. You will put energy. And I will argue to you that the most important energy we have is not the energy that fills up your car so you can go on your Thanksgiving day to visit your family. But I will argue with you that the most important energy we have is the food that feeds America. And I can keep going to you on every single department. If we talk about health, like America and every country in the world is spending huge percentage of our budget on health versus making sure that the food we eat and we consume and the way we interact with it is what keeps us healthy. And I can keep going and going and going. But one of the things that really we don't do, as I described, is that we don't take food seriously enough. President Sanchez from Spain hosted the NATO summit last year. And in this unlikely Forrest Gump life of mine, I was invited to speak to the foreign ministers, the defense ministers, and to the presidents. And my message was exactly the same one. Food needs to be seen as a national security issue. Therefore, I'm requesting that every president in America and overseas must have a national security food advisor. Because food is more than agriculture. Food is more than what we do through the USDA. Food is also the Department of Defense. If you read today, our military is not able to fulfill the needs of men and women to join because many people don't want to join or because many are unfit physically to join. That was the reason why the school lunch program was created in 1946, because actually the men in that day and women, if they joined at the time, of America, actually were unfed. Thanks to the military, we got the initial, what became the school lunch program or whatever it was called at the time. If I keep going in circles, food is health. Do we want to keep spending the money that we all work so hard to make to fix Americans, or to empower Americans? Do we want to spend money and use fixing everybody when we go older and we are super sick and we spend money just keeping everybody in the hospital trying to save them? Changing heart valves? Or we want to invest money early on when people are powerful and young and we can invest money in good food. Food is also education. Because if the men and women of America are not well fed, there's no way you learn in a school. But it applies the same to Haiti. If you have men and women that you are building schools, but those men and women barely have any food in their stomach, do you think those men and women are learning anything or they have opportunity for a future? So if I keep going, what we are getting wrong is this, that many of the issues we face in America are easily solvable with easy policy. Good policy that becomes good politics. And where, if you ask me, 89% of Americans believe that every American should have a plate of food on the table. 89%. If we are in a moment of building longer tables, not building higher walls and bringing America together, let's put food at the table. So, what we are not getting right is that every children in America should have breakfast and lunch. So we don't find divisions in who is wealthy and who is not. And we don't create this kind of two tiers in our schools. America can't afford it. And it's actually no money we throw to the problem, but money we invest in the solution. If we do school lunches, you know what happens? That we invest in infrastructure because we need to build kitchens in the schools. If we invest in infrastructures, we're creating jobs. We're making good investment in the future of America. You know why? Because those kitchens, they need to be man or woman, because who feeds the world are woman, no man. And you start hiring people that you train, people that work in rural areas that have no job sometimes, and you train them to be cooks, that then they cook decent meals to feed our children. And where they get the food? From the rural areas. How it happens that in the rural parts of the world, the people that feed America and the people that feed the world, seems they cannot feed themselves. Yes. That's a conundrum that is very simple to solve. That food that we will buy to feed our children in the schools that will be cooked by those women on the kitchens that we invested in the infrastructure will help the rural economies not to be poorer, but to be richer. And this is all used through our school system. And you know one more thing? When there is a hurricane, that school, and I've done it hundreds of times, all of a sudden is the school kitchen that helps you in a rural community hit by a tornado with no restaurant nearby, be activated not to feed children, but to feed the people that lost their homes in the middle of an emergency. And this is only one single area. So what we are doing wrong that we need to be doing better? Interagency work at the federal, at the state, and at the local level. Everybody thinks that just by throwing money at the problem, you solve the problem. If we don't understand that, like in the private sector, everything is interconnected, and if you don't invest money in the solution connected with the other areas, like defense, education, housing and urban development, health, and every department starts contributing what they can bring to solve the problem, all of a sudden we will stop throwing money to every problem we face and finally, once and for all, investing in solutions, all of a sudden, food is not a problem for us to solve. Food is an opportunity for us to seize.
Yes.
That's
wonderful.
that.
Great. So this is probably a good time for me to mention that I've got some rapid fire questions I'm going to ask you, and I want to be invited back, and I want you to be invited back. So we actually have to be done by 9 o'clock. So we've got a time.
I didn't lose you, right?
No, oh no, they're in it. But I want to be back in it the next time, so we're going to finish. We've got about 12 minutes left. So
we can open a restaurant. In 12 minutes?
How many meals could you provide in those big 12 minutes? But before we get into the rapid fire round, I did want to say this. I notice I'm doing it too. You talk with your hands, but I imagine you like juggling a bunch of things, right, while you were talking, and you do. So restaurants, World Central Kitchen, being named to a new role that the president has asked you to serve on, having been a keynote speaker at the first in 50-year White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition. And then I got a little sneak peek into your house back on that interview with Oprah, and there were people there. There were your daughters, there was your wife. You're juggling a lot. Where do you go for energy? How do you manage all of the things that you got in the air? Do you manage it? We need you, man.
Well,
so talk to us about it.
Satchel is here. You met Satchel, but my wife was with me. She flew to Washington. I said it at the beginning, and we can never lose sight of that clear, simple message. I'll be short, I promise. We are only as good as the people we have around us. And this goes to family, our loved ones, even the ones that we are like, she's making me eat the lentils I don't like. Yeah, that's our mom and our grandma, or our friends, our people we work with, new people we meet. So my energy really comes from the people. Unfortunately, I think I'm addicted now to go to emergencies, because I drop everything I have sometimes, used to go, and creates a lot of mayhem. In my business, I own my company, but I don't know how. Well, I never go to the board meetings, and well, not never, in case I have some investors here who happens they are friends.
You go just enough.
I don't want to give them any idea.
No, don't, please.
But we are really as good as the people we have around us. The issue with me is I learned that in the worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up. When I go to a hurricane, to a tornado, to a volcano, to a fire, to a war, to an earthquake, in those moments, I never see division. Maybe there somewhere, but where we are, I don't see right and left. I don't see Republicans and Democrats. I don't see whites and blacks. I don't see Christians and Jewish and Muslims. I see people helping people. So you tell me where I get my energy. My wife is my energy whisperer. Even every time I go on one of these emergencies, she says, "Good, my vacation." I don't know why. But I own much of who I am, if not to her, obviously. But sincerely, when I go to those moments, and not only overseas, in Washington, D.C., I've been 30 years part of this organization. This is Central Kitchen, where I met this man, Robert Egger. And this was a kitchen doing very simple things, taking homeless out of the streets, giving ex-convicts an opportunity to cook, to learn a profession, and they teach them to be cooks. In the process, they took food waste. But Robert Egger told me 30 years ago, when I go to DC, that it's not about food waste. Everybody talks about food waste. The problem is that when we have food waste, we waste people. And Robert began this amazing program to feed people, but in the process, empowering people, then getting jobs in restaurants like mine, fighting food waste, training people, making our city better. Robert Egger has shared this concept with many other people around America, and it's many kitchens done. But Robert Egger told me one phrase that I want you to remember. I wish was mine. Robert told me that philanthropy, and this is the economic club, that philanthropy seems is about the redemption of the giver, when philanthropy must be about the liberation of the receiver. But very quickly, it's okay to give, and it's okay to feel good giving. But if we are in the economic class, this is my challenge to all of you. We all do, and I know every one of you in this room does, smaller or bigger, money or time, knowledge. But when we give, it's not to redeem ourselves. When we give, we must do it in the same way we invest our money in Wall Street, our money into our companies, our money in venture capital. When we invest in those moments, we ask questions, and we want answers. When we invest money in making our cities, our country better, we must be asking, what is the return on the investment on the money I'm giving you? And if you don't get a good answer, move to another organization. This is my challenge to all of you, because I do believe there's plenty of money in philanthropy and government to handle many of the issues we have and to end hunger in the world in our lifetimes. But we must start investing the money wisely. Then one day we can all be claiming that together we ended many of the issues that our society faces, that our planet faces, if we do it thinking. Yep.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Okay. Rapid fire.
6 minutes. Yeah.
Here we go.
I'll be quicker, I promise.
Okay.
I mean, my English is not my first language, so it takes me longer to explain myself.
I don't think any of us would want to have been denied one word that you shared today. But here we go. Rapid fire. What's your favorite junk food? That's not rapid.
Frito-Lays.
Okay. There we go.
Is that junk?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great. I don't
think
know.
So. They're a donor, but yeah, I think it's junk. I think so.
Yeah.
Is it true that you played in the 2020 NBA Celebrity All-Star Game
I did.
in Chicago?
In Chicago. And
Okay.
I didn't miss a shot.
Woohoo!
Because the guys playing with it will not pass me the bullshit. And the coach was the main guy in my city. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm not giving you a reservation ever again in minibar. But, I mean, Bad Bunny, that was amazing. Yeah, that was a blast.
It was. Cool.
Yeah.
What meal reminds you of your childhood?
Arroz a la cubana is in Spain. In Cuba, they don't know what it is. It doesn't show up in the Spanish cookbooks. 2 fried eggs, tomato sauce, 1 pork sausage, maybe a fried banana with white rice. I grew up eating arroz a la cubana. If you take a look at me when I'm sideways, I look like an arroz a la cubana plate.
Things only you could say. Okay, so what do you keep in all those pockets of your famous vest?
Oh my God. I can find everything and anything. I have the GPS that tells everybody else where I am. Every member of World Central Kitchen carries one when you are on the field. The iPhone, which, when people ask me about technology, can be iPhone, can be other phone, but the ones we use, iPhone, is, I can communicate to people even when we speak a different language. Because Google Translator allows me to speak in real time. I can download maps, even if we have no cell signal. Therefore, I'm never lost because I have that power within my reach. Cash, a lot of cash in the early days. It's always difficult with CFO, but you need cash when there is no electricity, and cash talks in the early days. I have a pen. I have things I gather. Right now in my pocket, I have this tiny piece of oxidized metal that looks like a small dart. I picked up that near Kherson in Ukraine, barely a few days ago. And these are from the bombs, the shells that an army of people, I don't even want to mention, throw to Sivas, over schools and theaters and little towns. And this was given to me by a father where, in this case, the child didn't die, but was badly injured by many of those. Being oxidized creates a lot of other problems when you don't have the vaccines and the medication. So sometimes I carry things like this with me because it reminds me of what we do. In the case of Ukraine, even this seems very inoffensive. Things like this have killed people. So in my best, at the end, I carry just the things that are needed for the work I do, and other things I'm forgetting. But then I'm always bringing things with me that remind me why we are there. In this case, this is just a message that Ukraine is a great country, and we should never have a support war, ever again. We should not be sending men and women to war, but more important, we need to remember that Ukrainians are not attacking anybody, they are defending themselves. And we need to make sure that people like Putin have no space in our society no more.
Wow. So
I didn't know I had this.
It's all-
Yeah.
it's all real. What you do is real. Our gratitude, my admiration is real. We're going to end on a little bit of maybe a lighter note. So you're familiar with American football. And
Soccer, you mean?
no.
I
did not
I'm
expect
sorry,
any applause
but
for
we need to-
soccer. Come on, we got to
I
wrap
don't
this
know.
up.
I mean, with permission of the British and the Native Americans, the first people came to America were Spanish.
Okay.
90 years before the British. Therefore, yeah, for me, football is football.
American football.
Okay, I love American football.
Okay, after the Super Bowl, the winner gets asked, "Where are you going?" And they say to Disney World. But I'm going to ask you, and this is a shameless plug for a place here in Chicago. Where are you going after this, sir?
I'm going to the bazaar by José Andrés.
Exactly.
With the Gibson's
Thank you,
group.
Jose. Thank
So,
you.
we finished?
That's it.
So I want to finish with one phrase because you need to be on time. I mentioned before, tell me what you eat, I'll tell you who you are. The same guy, I repeat, a Frenchman, said, the destiny of the nations will depend in how they feed themselves. Let's feed America, but more important, let's feed the soul of the world. It's our destiny. Let's make it happen.